Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, a podcast about business in Brazil and in the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American living in Brazil for many years and known as the King of Networking, connecting people and talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest is Lucas Batista Santos, and he's joining us today from Singapore. Lucas is Brazilian, an oil and gas technology specialist, where in Brazil he studied at the Federal University of Itajuba, where he majored in Mechatronics, Robotics, and Automation Engineering. And now in Singapore, he finished an MBA in Business Administration at the NUS Business School, recognized as one of the best in Southeast Asia. A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to interview Lucas on my Portuguese language podcast, BBN Brasil Podcast, and found him such a fascinating person that I wanted to follow up with this interview in English for our English-speaking audience. So with that, Lucas, hello again and welcome to Talk to Brazil Business Connection.
Hey, hello, Tom. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
And for us and for our listeners, Lucas, just give us a brief update of your professional path from Brazil to Singapore.
Sure. Yeah, so like you mentioned, I graduated in Brazil, in Itajuba, Unifei, the Federal University of Itajuba, right, in control and automation. And then in Brazil, I was always interested in the energy sector, especially in the oil and gas. So I had friends from the university that were working at the oil and gas. So I was always interested on that. Then I joined an oil and gas company, American company, and started working in Brazil. Worked 3 years there in offshore, deep water in Brazil, pre-sal in Brazil. And from there, I had the opportunity to go to Houston in U.S., right? And I started working in the technology R&D department of the company. And so I did, working in Houston in R&D, working as a system engineer, project management in Houston on the new projects that we were developing there. So I worked there for 3 years, then had the opportunity to go to UK, where I worked for 1 year with project management, portfolio management, and then again another opportunity came to relocate one more time, and then I came to Singapore, and I've been in Singapore for 3.5 years, and here I've been managing the R&D team for our department here in Singapore.
Well, you've literally gone around the world.
Yes, and I was very lucky that I went around the world, and only nice places, only nice places. And I always say that now, Singapore is the farthest away that I can be from Brazil, right? So now, next place we go will be for sure closer to Brazil. There's no way to be further away from Brazil.
Well, one thing, you can step out your door, and if you turn right or turn left, you're always on your way back to Brazil, right?
Yeah.
Just have to find a fast way to make that happen. But one thing, obviously, from here being in Brazil, we think of that as being the other side of the world or the end of the world or anything. But from a business standpoint, the Southeast Asia seems to be a central starting point for many businesses and certainly many multicultural interactions amongst business. When we look at the global population, the majority of the global population is situated in Southeast Asia and Asia. So that's really where it's all happening, right?
Yes, Don, that's true. When you look at Southeast Asia only, right? So if you look at the growth rate of the Southeast Asian countries, so it's been pretty high, right, in the past few years. right? So these countries have been developing a lot, and lots of business opportunities in the past, let's say in the past 30, 50 years, right? So what you have seen, if you look at the history, you've seen that lots of Western companies came to Asia, to open up business in Asia, etc. So that have grown a lot. And when you talk about Asia, right? So Asia itself, yes. So majority of the population is in Asia. That's true. And there is a chart that I really like. I can send you the link later. And it says 2,000 years of economy in one chart. And what that chart shows is that in the beginning, before the Industrial Revolution, the highest GDP, the strong economies, they were in Asia. It was really with the Industrial Revolution that economy, the high GDPs move it over to the Western side, especially Europe and America, right? And now it's starting to come back again as the Asia is catching up on technologies, and having the same technology power as the Western side. So they're starting to become the stronger economies again.
Well, share that chart with me, and I'll put it up on my site. I'm certainly sure that's interesting. But what we talked about when I interviewed in Portuguese, we talked quite a bit about Singapore as sort of a crossroads from the Western culture, the Eastern culture. Singapore itself, the inhabitants seem to be multicultural oriented. And as you mentioned, you have a lot of multinational companies establishing headquarters there. So really, you specifically, being a foreigner in Singapore doesn't really feel foreign, does it?
No. So in Singapore, like I said, Singapore is a hub in Southeast Asia, right? And then, and if you look, and again, if you go back to history, it's a hub. It used to be a trading point, right? So where ships would come from China and stop in Singapore and then go to Europe, etc. Right? So that's why it is a very well positioned when you look at the geography, right? And another thing, again, talking about history, right? So if you study the history of Singapore, when Singapore became independent, one of the most, I would say, one of the most important things that was done was to make English the official language, right? So by making English the official language, you officially open to all the Western side, all the foreigners, and that facilitated a lot what you mentioned about all these companies having headquarters here, etc. Because the language facilitates a lot. And also, of course, you have multiple different initiatives from the government, incentives from the government,
right,
to bring companies, headquarters, offices to be in Singapore. It is a business center in Southeast Asia for sure.
Good point that you brought up, though. So, as I know your family's there in Singapore, your children are going to be back to school now. So in a typical normal school in Singapore, the language is English.
It is English, yeah. So it's really good. I think it's really good for my kids because they have everything is in English. The class is in English, but they also do 1 hour Mandarin per day.
Good.
So at the school, everything is in English, and they get 1 hour Mandarin per day. And then we speak Portuguese at home. So the kids, they're growing up and learning 3 languages at a time.
And what they say, the more languages you learn, the easier it is to learn more languages. So persons that I know who speak 6 or 7 languages have said that. It just, once you get past the 3rd language, it's all easy.
Interesting.
Very good. Now, you, from your standpoint in school, when we spoke before, you were mentoring students at the school. You had your certainly great relationships with the students and some of your colleagues in the MBA. How is that to adjust culturally from you as a Brazilian, a Westerner, to the Eastern cultures in terms of leadership, in terms of business?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things, when you are moving, especially coming to Asia, right, is to be open, right, to the new culture, and also to study and understand the new culture, because in Brazil and not, of course, not only in Brazil, but on the Western side, I would say we learn very little about Asia, right? So when you talk about Asia in Brazil, I think normally the Brazilian people will think about Japanese because we have many Japanese in Brazil, right? So we're used to see Japanese. So when you think about Asian in Brazil, you think about Japanese, but in reality, you have Indonesians, Filipinos, Malay, Thailand, and India, right? So, and Chinese. So it's very diverse. So you got to be open. You got to study, learn their customs. Everything they do different. I did when I left Brazil the first time. Going from Brazil to US, one of the things that I noticed I think in the Western, especially in US, you see quite a bit of competition at work,
Right.
And that's something that I don't see much in here in Singapore, and I didn't see it all in UK. I think one of the reasons, for example, when you look at UK, the overall population in UK it's a bit old population, right? So and then when you have an office with majority of the people already, let's say above 50, they're not that eager, to grow in the career. They're more like interest, and the people in UK and Europe itself, they're more interested in enjoying life, right? So
right.
But in US and here in Asia as well, you see quite a bit of hard working, and people interested to grow, right? So you see that difference, and also you have language challenge, right? So I struggle a bit. I struggled really when I went from Brazil to US, because I went to Texas, and then I had that
Right.
we had that redneck accent, right? And and I don't know if you're familiar. You're familiar with the Cajun accent in Louisiana?
Yes.
Yeah, that one, it was just impossible to understand. It's like Scottish. It seems to be a different language.
Well, I'm Scottish descent, so you can see that I understand. But anyway, languages have that. They have their local differences. So depending really where you are, sometimes it is that challenge. Even here in Brazil, when I first came to Brazil and I went to the northeastern part, this was many, many years ago, and I was really trying to learn Portuguese. I really found going there that it was different. The way people speak, the sound, the intonation, even though it's the same language, the way it's said and spoken is different. And I really got confused.
That's true. Yeah. So that varies a lot. But after relocating a couple of times, I think I got used it. Like I said, I struggled a bit when I went to US first time in Houston with the redneck accent, and Cajun was almost impossible to understand. And then in UK, I had a bit of challenge, especially because in UK they use different words, right? So if you go to a restaurant, you ask for the bill. In US, you ask check. You say check,
Right.
And then at work, I would say things at work in UK, and the guys would look at me, "What you said?" And then, but it was funny because we're friends, colleagues at work, and then I asked them to correct me so I would get used to the British words,
Right.
Things like jumper, sweater, underground, subway, those sort of things. And then when I came to Singapore, I think it was way easier for me because I had this experience in US and then UK, and when I came to Singapore was not so hard.
Right.
Because some people, when they come to Singapore the first time, they find it very hard to understand the Singaporeans, because here we have it's not an accent, but they call it Singlish,
Right.
It's
right.
the Singaporean English, right? So they tend to cut lots of words, shorten everything, and they also add few words that it just means nothing, but they just add that, and then sometimes if you're not familiar, you don't understand what they're saying. They also repeat, if you ask something, oh, can you do this for me, they will say can, they'll repeat can 4 times. Yeah, if you say like, oh, and if you say like, oh, are you okay with this? And then instead of just say okay, they say okay can, so they normally add can, and there's another word they add is la. La means nothing, but they just add la on everything, so if they're gonna say no to you, instead of just saying no, they say no la,
But I think that's the same in anywhere
on.
where you go. Obviously, if you go as a tourist and it's one day in each country, it's difficult. But when you relocate to either work or study like you did, obviously you take a couple days, maybe weeks to adapt. But eventually you adapt and you start communicating, understand the communication. And that's also important from a business standpoint. Because many times business persons going out in the world and traveling, they're it's one day here, one day there, and feel they don't understand. But really, one day is really too little to understand. So for business trips, and even virtual business trips today, because everything's virtual, to help understand talking to people in different countries, and even if it is English, you need to take time to understand how other people speak English, because English is different everywhere. So I think that's the importance of the challenge of business today virtually. Even if English is the basis, you need to understand English with many different accents, let's put it that way. The way that you said the Texan speaks it in England, Singapore, and even Brazil, the way Brazilians speak English. So when I came here and somebody speaking to me in English, I have to recalibrate my brain. Because what are you saying? And in the end, they're adapting their Portuguese sounding words to English. And it doesn't always come out right to me. So, and I'm sure what I say doesn't come out right to them. So time is of essence when you're learning, right?
Yeah, that's true. And it's funny that you're talking about the Brazilian English, because today I can easily spot, if there is a Brazilian speaking either in a meeting or something, I can easily see, the accent, I think is unique. You can identify that. Like you said, there's many different ways of speaking English, right? Many different accents. Yeah.
Well, it's fair to say, many people say that, like you said, in Singapore, they adopted and adjusted to English. But English, and let's talk to English as a second language is another language. It's not American English. It's not British English. It's English as a second language, adjusted to each culture.
That's true. But going back to what we were talking, right? I think out of all these, of course, like you said, if you go one day is one thing, but if you come, like you said, you must adapt, so you really, you need to realize that you're the foreign in the country, right? So you are the one coming, so you need to adapt.
Right.
So the country is not going to adapt for you. And there's many different, there's many difference on the culture side, on ways of doing things, on laws, right? So many different laws. For example, in Singapore, you cannot mask gum. There's no gum. You cannot even buy a gum here. So, and it's prohibited, and you could get a fine if you mask a gum and spew it in the floor, so and so on, laws, like I said, culture, many different things. Oh, another good one, I don't know if you know, but in Singapore, very very few people have car, so it's not so common to have cars because cars here are very expensive. The government have some pretty high
well, really, in
that you
terms
need
of
to buy.
distances, everything's very close, comparatively speaking, right?
Yeah. So the way the if you want to compare, I would say it would be something like if you live in São Paulo, right, in the Grand São Paulo, like you don't need a car. You can use the public transport or subway, or today you can use Uber, right?
Right.
And the same thing, if you look at London, New York, people that live in Manhattan or London, inside London, they don't really have a car because they can do everything with public transport,
Right.
And that's the same thing in Singapore. Like here, I don't have a car, and we can do everything using the public transport here. You can go anywhere you want, and also if you want to use taxi or Uber. Here we don't have Uber, but we have something that it's called Grabby, and it's not expensive, so
Right.
you can easily transport that. But again, that was something that I had to adapt, because I used to have car in Brazil, US, and UK, and then in Singapore it's like, okay, no car,
Oh, well, and that's adaptation, even in Brazil, because one of the first levels of aspiration of most Brazilians is to have a car. Second level of aspiration is to have a house. And many people spend their whole life working either to get the car or get the house. And today, in many places in the world, you see that. You don't need the house and you don't need the car. And say a house, you need to have somewhere to stay, but you don't necessarily have to own it anymore. So I think this has all changed. And some of these concepts in Brazil and other places are also changing. But I think that for you, that's the advantage of being out there, of going through the different countries that you have, of visiting and also working and studying. But on our last conversation on the BBN podcast, you talked a lot, too, about networking. How is adjusting networking to Southeast Asia? How does that happen? And how has that happened with you, with your colleagues at school, with people in business? Is it different?
Yeah, so it is certainly different. And the main, especially in Singapore, because Singapore have so many foreigners, right? People from all over the place, from Southeast Asia, right? From Asia, from Europe, from US, Brazil. So the culture here is very diverse, so we have a very high diversity on everything you do, I think I mentioned to you last time, right? So when I studied in Brazil, in my when I did my college degree there, we were 40 students and now Brazilians, right? So there was no foreign at all. And then in the MBA here, majority of the students were foreign,
Right.
and less than half of the class was Singaporeans, and the same thing when I go to the university here for hiring fresh grads, that also what I see, so I see like lots of foreign students and then fewer Singaporeans ones, and the main reason for that is because, like I said, Singapore is a hub. It has very good universities, very good institutions. So
Right.
people living in the countries in Southeast Asia, right? So if you can afford for your kid to come to Singapore to study, they're gonna do it,
Right.
So they're gonna go and pay, and similar to a family paying for someone in Brazil to go study abroad,
Right.
abroad. So if you can afford, you're gonna do that. In the other hand, in Singapore, if the family can afford, normally they're gonna send the kids to Europe or US, So if they have a better condition, if the family can afford, they would tend to push the kids to say, "Oh, go do college degree in US or Europe. That's very common as well.
Well, I think that's fair because obviously for persons born and living in Singapore, to get international exposure, they have to leave Singapore. Because obviously, like you said, living in a country that has a very extremely high level of education, everybody speaks English, the subway functions, getting around is one way, but most of the world isn't that way. Most of the world's more complex. So for a person to have an understanding, and that works both ways. You left Itajuba, went to Houston, England, and now Singapore, so you have a feeling for a number of different cultures. And when we're talking about global cultures and global business, it's not just one pie. It's a lot of little pieces of the pie. And to be successful in business, you need to understand it all. And you need to network with people from different cultures.
Yeah, and that is something that, especially on the MBA here, they emphasize a lot, and like I said, we have a very diverse cohort, right? Mm-hmm. So students from everywhere. And one of the things that's most important that they always emphasize in the MBA is like a network. Mm-hmm. There's loads of the school will do network sessions. They will bring business people, companies,
right? And
then the students can go and network with these companies, and also network between the students themselves, right?
Right.
Because, for example, I was doing a part-time, but I was also in contact with the full-time cohort. But in the part-time itself, you have people working on many different companies, many different industries, healthcare, finance, consumables, etc., energy, right? So you get you get the opportunity, before class. Before the class starts, or maybe in the interval, you get like 15 minutes that you can chat with someone that works in the healthcare, someone that works in finance, someone that works in Google or Apple or something like that, so it's pretty good.
No, I think that's essential because even from your profession, what you learned years ago, mechatronics and robotics and automation engineering, that adapts just across the board to any industry. Even though you are a specialist in oil and gas, but the same concepts function anywhere. Even today, talking about health or consumer, everything today seems to be mechatronics and robotics.
Yeah, that's right. So when I started the automation course in Brazil, automation was already already a hot topic, and in this past years, it's been becoming even more, right? So especially when you talk about automation, then when you go towards the artificial intelligence, right? So that have increased exponentially, due to some new findings and some developments that we had in the past years, and it's just increasing, right? And then, like I mentioned,
that's fantastic.
Like I mentioned the other time, I think the pandemic is just is being a catalyzer, right, for the automation. Companies that were holding off on automation before the pandemic, they were resistant, they were forced to do now. So it's just increasing now.
It's automation, but it's also innovation. Many of ideas that 6 months ago people thought might not be profitable have instantly become profitable because of that. When you're talking about the touchless, we're in a touchless society now worldwide. Nobody wants to touch anything anymore. So everything is becoming voice controlled or voice oriented. The artificial intelligence that you mentioned in everything today. Even last year, even before this pandemic, every Google transcribed all podcasts in the world and transcribed and indexed them from voice. So whatever we're saying right now, whatever anybody says on a podcast is being transcribed and indexed. And that's artificial intelligence that's doing that. There's not somebody sitting around with pencil and paper trying to put it on. It's all happening automatically. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, Indeed. It's interesting. I was watching a documentary the other day about that, and then he was talking about Canada. How is the name? I forgot the name of the city, but it's a city where we have all the innovation in machine learning. In especially neural networks. And then they had this small startup where they had this software that if you say few words to this app that they created, it would record your speech, and then from there it would start. You could type anything that it would say exactly with your words, so like exactly with your accent, the way you speak. So you could replicate your voice on the exact way.
Copy it.
It's and copy it. It's just crazy, So the all the things, all the possibilities that is opening, all the things. It's just amazing, but at the same time, it's also dangerous, right? So if not use it in the right way.
Well, that's part of taking innovation and new things forward. But Lucas, I want to thank. We're coming to the end of our time, and for our listeners, just to understand the expanse of the world, we're talking today. It's going on 9 a.m. here in Brazil, but it's also evening in Singapore. So Lucas is getting ready for his evening, and this is what I say about the world. When we here in Brazil are waking up and getting ready for our day, almost 3/4 of the world has had their day, has done their business, is already enjoying themselves, thinking about tomorrow. So I want to thank you again for your participation, taking your time in sharing, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Tom. And that one of the nice things of being in Asia here is that our weekend starts first.
That's true. So,
thank you.
Enjoy the weekend, enjoy your family, and certainly in the future we'll be back talking some more, okay?
All right, sir. Thank you very much. You also have a great day there in Brazil and a great week coming.
We will.
All right.
So thanks again for sharing your time. And those of you who want to hear more and learn more about Lucas Batista Santos, and his name is Lucas Batista, and the last name is Santos, Santos. You can find him on LinkedIn or visit our website, www.talk2brazil.com, and that's TALK, the number 2, BRAZIL.com. All previous shows of Talk to Brazil are also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. So I'd like to thank our audience and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their website, www.focusmi.com. That's FOCUSMI.com. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.